as I'm getting older, like there's something about being able to hold contrasting ideas without having to say one is right or one is wrong. And also
Mm,
without being wishy-washy and just like it's all good. It's something like, no, I'm big enough to like see that there are parts of me that really love structure and conformity and convention. And there are also parts of me that want to just tear that shit down and destroy things.
We are learning to trust the ever-evolving rhythms of nature.
We are committed to embracing our shadow within community.
And reclaiming our sovereignty.
We do this together.
That is the way.
welcome to the Elemental Movement Podcast. I'm Matt. I have Elden with me and a dear friend of mine, Aaron Canter. Let's continue where we left off of recording this topic of parenthood, being a parent. Right before we started recording, Aaron, you were sharing about your reflections about being a parent to a young child and now being a parent to older children or really young men, right?
Young men who I'm super proud of and who like take a deep interest in like embodiment, physicality, training, nutrition,
Mm-hmm.
cultivating their minds, meditation, psychology, anthropology, like just curious, quirky young men, who like I really enjoy hanging out with and training with and discussing ideas with. So different than the little babies that needed care constantly, you know?
I do know. I do.
And as much as I
Yeah,
love them, I was talking to Bodhi today as we were driving about like the resentment I really felt as a young dad who like felt like my youth was stolen from me because I needed to like
Mm,
take care of these people. And I don't think I let that like affect our relationship all that much, but it definitely did. So we
mm-hmm,
had a nice conversation about that.
mm-hmm. When was your first son born? How old were you?
I was 24. Yeah.
24.
Yeah, I was 24 when Bodhi was born.
You were a young man.
He's yeah, yeah, pretty young. Back in the day, that would have been like an old man, but in today's standards, where we all mature, we're all fucking children until we're 70. Um, I'm a young boy, you know.
Oh man.
and would you share a little bit about like your trajectory from then to now? I mean, like you kind of shared a little bit about like the pull of like when they're a child and like you're rocking them to sleep. This is right before we got on the mics, and then they go to sleep and you're like, okay, now I can go do my thing. And now you have like your training partner in your child who you can like have your children who you can have these deeper conversations and inquiry with. Like, what has that arc been like?
Like really slow and almost imperceptible up until I think about 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago was when it like really hit me, where I was at the climbing gym with both my boys. They had their shirts off. They're just ripped, like beautiful specimens of health. And it was just the three of us at this little gym. So at one point, I forget who suggested it, but it's like, let's all take a picture. So like the three of us take a picture. So I have my two boys next to me. And it was just like the sense of like, oh wow. It was that moment of just noticing like things have shifted. I'm not just giving them rides places. I'm talking to them about things that matter to me and matter to them. They're asking me advice on certain things. I'm asking them advice on certain things. Bodhi's created this beautiful like strength training program for me that I've been following, and it's just changing my physiology, changing my body composition and my capacity to like actually produce power. It's a super well thought out, intelligent program that Bodhi's kind of created. I've created some protocols and some games and some ways for him to kind of soften a little bit, loosen up after his like intense days of climbing, down regulate. So there's like a
Mm,
nice exchange there. Yeah, but it was like the transition is almost like it just happened so gradually. And then like at one point I was like, whoa, it's happened. I'm in a completely different place. Like whatever I was holding on to, whatever kind of responsibility or stress I was holding on to that was like programmed in my being, it's like, oh, I can let go of that. I have a different life.
how does that feel?
It feels really like there's two things, right? There's the happiness and the relief and the excitement, and then there's also
Mm-hmm.
like the grief of like, ah, oh, shit, I missed this. I mean, I've gone through like different phases of grieving the lack of presence when I was
Mm,
a younger father.
mm,
And I think I was actually pretty damn present. But there are like I was annoyed a lot. Like,
mhm.
get your fucking coat on. Like, put the shoes on. Let's go. Don't put the shoes on. Eat the food. Okay, don't eat the food. Let's just go. Okay,
I don't
don't. We
fucking
don't have to
care.
go. But just like nothing was easy. Everything was like. So there was so much of that, and there was so much annoyance and just like frustration in my system.
Uh,
And so I kind of like see how none of that was really entirely necessary.
and then time passes you by, and before you know it, right?
Yeah, and it's like,
They're
oh, it's
young
all
men.
good. It's all good, and I
Mm,
still have the time to do the things I want to do. I'm still young enough to like pursue some of my dreams, and like, like the sense of urgency
mhm,
wasn't necessary at all.
mm,
So, so there's
mm,
I think that kind of toggling between the like whoa excitement and like oh shit, look at all the wasted time, like holding both of those things is actually probably like the beginning. Like that's the seed of like where wisdom I think comes from. That's why like
mm,
folks who are older and who've lived, they hold the melancholy of not having done something, and also like the satisfaction of having done something, and all the spaces in between. So I think I'm feeling
mm,
something like that.
mm.
Like if one of my kids was like, hey, give me some advice on parenting, I'd be like, hey, take it easy. It's fine. Nothing matters that much. Just enjoy them, you know?
Mhm, mm. That's good medicine,
And
brother. As a
yeah,
parent to young children, something I can always stand to hear.
yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, as a parent to my daughter just turned 8.
Happy
And
birthday, Violet.
yeah, happy
Oh,
birthday,
cool.
Violet.
Happy birthday.
And I am currently like, I literally like sent her mom and I split 4 years ago, a text like I am annoyed with my daughter right now. Like, and it's like, it's this general, like, this like lack of presence on her part where she's like, doesn't have situational awareness. And it's like, and what you were just like saying was really like confronting me. I was just like, shit, like how am I out of balance with this? So if you're looking back in your past self who's parenting and annoyed and feeling that urgency, like how would you actually like how would you hold space for that person, that early iteration of yourself as
Hmm.
dad?
Huh. Yeah, that's a good question. I must enter the simulation. Go back in time. There's something about attunement, like expecting my kids to be attuned. It's not what I have to model attunement, and I have to model attunement like in myself. I have to model down regulating in myself. I have to model like releasing stress, like dealing with what it like, and also
Mm,
like a lot of I think a lot of the frustrations I had as a kid was actually, or when my kids were little, was not being able to really set good boundaries. My ex-wife and
mm,
I both like didn't do that well. So the kids kind of ran the house. So over time we kind of learned how to like create some containment for them that felt really good for them and made us more sane as well. So there'd be something about, if I'd give advice to myself, it's like, hey, create create a series of really amazing games that the kids like to play that have to do with going to bed, washing dishes, cleaning up after themselves, putting their clothes on, like putting shit away, greeting guests, like all these like
mm.
a
Make
series
it
of nested
playful.
games. So life is just nested games, just games on top of games on top of games. And they can learn how to like play a game, break down the parts of the game to master the game, and then obviously apply that to myself. Like parenting is a series of nested games, partnership, tons of games within partnership. There's the game of just like looking into Kendra's eyes and being like, I get it. It's really hard. You're doing a good job. Like if I played that game more, like there would have been a lot
Mhm.
more, I don't know, recharging of the parents. Chandra would have felt more recharged. I would have felt more recharged. if we had this frame of this is a game, this is a practice, these are the things we can practice.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up. I recently had a few days away from my children and my wife. They were visiting family. I couldn't leave the home. And I have a beautiful forest behind my house. And I took our dog out, unleashed, and we just had like a walkabout through the forest. Just no, it wasn't a hike. It wasn't a like we're gonna forage for something. It was just like we're just gonna walk out in the forest.
Yeah, a wander.
Who knows? Yeah, exactly. It was just wandering. And
Yeah.
I did that with my son when we first moved here. And then we had brought my daughter, and she's a little too young, and she made it pretty like unenjoyable with like her crankiness because she was just under 2. And it kind of discouraged me from continuing that practice. And just also the weather and general, just like, oh, this is not productive. Trying to do productive things, right? We're on a time crunch, urgency, as you kind of described it. And in doing these last couple of days without the children, I was like, you know what? I need to bring this practice back, at least for my son right now, and go out there with him. He's almost 4 now. It's like he's up for that.
Yeah.
He would love that if he's in the right space. And if I'm attuned to his energy and I go out there, like that, it could be such a nourishing practice for the both of us and create some amazing core memories for him, like core experiences, maybe even pre-memories for him.
Totally.
To really anchor from and draw upon. When I hear you talking about that stuff, your advice to your old self, I'm like, oh, there it is. Cool.
Yeah, because there are some core things that we used to do. Like we lived in Somerville, Boston, like just the outskirts of Boston. We would walk to school and take trains together, and we had like we're gonna hang on the bars of the trains, and we're gonna go to this spot to get this snack. And there's a little alleyway over here, and we can go up the fire escape and jump from roof to roof on our way to school. Or like sometimes like Bodhi would ride on my shoulders and Jasper ride on the handlebar of my bike, and we kind of weave through traffic. There's all these little like moments of like wildness within an urban environment. And I'd see some parents smiling at me, other parents like glowering at me disapprovingly because no one had a helmet on, but like those moments are so important.
Yeah, that draws me to something I wanted to weave into this conversation. I was drawn to bring this up because of a story that I believe you told me one of the first times we really connected deeply. And you're talking about a former teacher of mine and a friend of yours, Ido Portal, and his identification of like your kids versus the other kids back when your kids were maybe like 10 years old.
Yeah. So Ido spent some time with me in the States, a few months, like for various reasons that we don't have to go into. But we'd sometimes train at the playground. I had my kids with me, so they would come. And my kids would basically, on swing sets, they would climb the chains and go to the top of the thing and just walk on the balance, like use it as a balance beam, 8 feet off the ground, and then climb down the chains or swing down the poles and stuff. Yeah. And then Ido was like looking, and he's from Israel, and the kids are a little more physical there too. Like I grew up in Brazil, kids are a little more physical. And we're both looking around, we're like, look at these kids. They don't even know, other kids don't even know how to run, right? And there's all these parents like, don't do that. That's dangerous. Don't do what he's doing. That's dangerous. You'll fall and hurt yourself. And Ido said something like, it's like your kids are not even of the same species.
Yeah. And so that brings me to this question of what has it been your experience being a parent in this society? And where do you see, I guess, like a discord in the way that you see things and the way that other parents may see things, or your perception of how they see things?
My experience when they were little was like fairly isolated because I had my kids pretty young. Most of my friend group was fucking off, training, doing whatever, traveling the world, going to workshops, and I was like taking care of kids. And a lot of like the kids hit their age were like parents were older, architects, professors, like nothing, but it was just like I had a heart. I was kind of young and like didn't quite know how to connect. So I felt pretty isolated. I loved going to playgrounds and hearing like hey, Bodhi's dad is here. Because like I would show up and I would play with the kids. We'd play like these epic games of like tag where I was like trying to tag everybody and people were and like I could see like I could see the beautiful like relationships being formed between kids who are working on a team. Like freeze tag was just such an amazing part of about 2 years of like Bodhi and Jasper's life where like we would spend 2 hours every day after school playing freeze tag with the whole playground. And generally I was it. All the kids who were there were kind of working against me. I was trying to freeze everybody, and we really got some fundamental parkour skills in there. But and some parents would be very appreciative of like, hey, there's an adult really playing and roughhousing with all these kids, and other parents would be super suspicious, like the fuck is wrong with this guy? He's kind of pervy and weird. Why is he touching like all these kids? Like, so that was like a weird thing to deal with, and yeah, yeah, it's just strange to be in a
Isn't that
in a
an
culture that's
interesting thing with like I'm kind of that parent too in lots of
yeah,
situations, right? And in certain groups people really welcome it and they appreciate it. That
right,
like interacting with their children, playing with them, roughhousing with them. Like I know my limits. I'm not going to hurt your child, and
totally,
I'm not a pedophile. Like that's just not who I am, right? Like I am a
right,
like well-adjusted man that wants to like spread some joy, right? And
yeah,
help these
and
kids like grow into themselves
totally,
and
and
have an
there's so much
exchange.
transmission. There's so
Yeah.
much transmission that happens. Like I'm
Yeah.
teaching you about physics and your body and your limits. I'm learning about those things with you. Like
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah. And yet, some parents they might not even say anything. And maybe it's my own projection, but it sure doesn't feel like it. Where you're like, this is making this parent very uncomfortable.
yeah,
And it's their kid, so I want to respect that. I want to step away and be like,
absolutely.
okay, like I'm not gonna get in the way of you and your child. Like that is not my place. But it's just a real shame that that's so present in our culture.
Yeah, I mean, like, so we would play all these games of tag, but like tag at one point got forbidden in the school, the public school that Bodie and Jasper went to. Like, too many kids were getting hurt. One kid got hurt. I don't know, but like, no tag, right? And then there's a whole like, hands are not for hitting, hands to yourself. You can't touch people when you play with them. And like, these things are just beyond ridiculous in my way of thinking of like development and like how we as humans learn about the world. So it's hard for me to like I mean, I'd have these conversations with Bodhi and Jasper, like that thing that they're saying hands are not for hitting. Well, it's not true. Hands are for hitting. They're also for healing. They're for building. They're for all sorts of things. You can do all sorts of things with your hands, and it doesn't mean you should hit everybody. But hands are definitely meant for hitting and other things. They're tool wielding, amazing, magical things. Like so, like and Chandra, my ex-wife, was like, Aaron, that's too complicated. It's like, no, it's not. They need to know that like it's okay to defend
Mm.
themselves. It's okay to use like what they have when they need to. Yeah.
So I'm curious how you have navigated. It's like, we're talking about in like the broader spectrum of this conversation, just like differing ideals cohabitating in the same space, right?
Yeah.
And so your ex's name is Chandra.
Yep.
So at what age, when your kids were at what age, or how long ago did you two split?
I think Jasper was around 2 and he's 16 now. So like 14 years ago, Bodhi was probably 5 or 6. And I'm really proud of how we did it. Like I think I said before we started recording, like we're having dinner all together as a family. Shonda, her husband, their kid, Bodhi, Jasper, me, Bodhi's girlfriend. We do that Tuesday nights. And even when we split, like I lived either on the same street or on the same block. We've even had moments of living in the same house in different units. We've really wanted to make sure the kids got plenty of time with both of us. They could go freely between the houses. There was no real schedule. It was all ad hoc. But I think
Mm.
Chandra has much more of a desire to just adhere to the norms of society. And I have much more of like, question everything. Don't trust authority. You don't have to do it that way. And the boys are good right now. They have discipline, they have structure, they have all these things. And like a lot of that's because Chandra provided like a really good foundation, but they're also like these maverick creative rebels.
That's powerful.
Yeah, and I think as I'm getting older, like there's something about being able to hold contrasting ideas without having to say one is right or one is wrong, and
Mm,
also without being wishy-washy and just like it's all good. It's something like, no, I'm big enough to like see that there are parts of me that really love structure and conformity and convention. And there are also parts of me that want to just tear that shit down and destroy things. And it's okay. I contain all of that rather than trying to reconcile those two things. Just like be big enough to like hold to let those two things exist within myself and also in all my relationships.
Yeah. So what you just brought into is like there's this like in this contrast, like it's like how do you have respect for both for all of the things within it,
Yeah,
right? Which feels like it's like a really dynamic dance. I'm imagining that all three of us and probably most people listening have like some experience of like doing that dance well and also doing that dance not so well.
yeah.
And at least for me, it's like I mentioned my daughter's mother and I split 4 years ago, a little over that, when she was 3. My daughter was 3, and like navigating, I mean, and like through the pandemic, even like with like a young
Mm,
child with very differing like foundational ideals. Like I'm probably like
sure.
more on your side of the spectrum, and she's probably more on your ex's side of the spectrum. And it's like
Yeah.
it's been a really big lesson for me in like how do I actually like respectfully hold my center.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And my sense, like, as a father and as like a more rebellious person, was that like society was on her side, and I
mm.
had to like save the kids from being like brainwashed and turned into little
Little
whatever fill in the
Nazis.
blank, right? Yeah, yeah, just little conforming like cogs in the wheel, you know. And of course, this is one frame, and it's like now I see it really, really, really differently. But it
Well,
was
see
hard for me to see that I had
that
value.
idea isn't that idea is not necessarily wrong. It's just one of many,
Yeah,
right? That's probably a role that you played, and your presence probably helped
absolutely.
prevent that. That was
Totally.
there. That
Uh,
was present.
yeah. I mean, Bodhi told me the other day, he's like, hey, Dad, thanks for really like always questioning things. Like, he said, like, I just started thinking for the first time. Like, I realized, like, I don't think I had an original thought until like up until like a few weeks ago. So there's like these beautiful moments of like, oh, wow. Like my kids coming into themselves and like being able to articulate, like, whoa, I've just been regurgitating things I've heard or like just combining. Like my thoughts were a collage of everything I've heard, and now I'm just like freestyling my own thing. Like that feels different. You know, gluing things together feels different than composing something yourself.
So what I'm curious about, like within this, and I actually want to present this to all three of us, is like, how have you like managed to navigate these polarized dichotomies, if you will, in a
Mm,
way that is like solid and it feels like supportive to you and respectful to everybody else? And then how have you also or like failed to do so? Does that
yeah.
make sense? I know I used like some words that felt like they were less concrete and more abstract, but
Yeah, yeah, no, it makes sense. Like as you're saying that, the answer is like I have not managed. I'm like barely managing. And that's kind of good enough sometimes. But I wouldn't be like, hey, look at me as the example of a man who stands in his integrity and knows his center and is always strong and super courageous and like like what? No, like I've made so many fucking mistakes and like constantly just trying to figure out what it means to stand in my center and like
Mm.
stand and the older I get, I think the easier it's becoming. The more confidence I have in my own intuition, the more confidence I have in like the knowledge I've gained and the choices I make. I can back it up more, but not through facts, not through like, hey, the studies prove. It's like this is just kind of true. It's 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 the way it occurs to me, and that's good enough.
An example of when I it's been very present in my own life where I didn't hold that well was with the whole COVID thing.
Mm,
And like I had a very firm belief, like very strongly held belief from the very beginning that the way we responded to this was just a dramatic failure or misresponse.
yeah,
And I still believe that actually. Like I feel like I got it right in whatever word that is, right, whatever the fuck that means. I feel like I had it right the whole time. Like my opinions never really changed. They still haven't changed. That said, the way in which I went about that was very unskillful.
Hmm.
There was a lot of anger at first towards people that were basically getting tricked into like a lot of fear and were diving into their fear response. And there wasn't a lot of compassion. There was, as it continued and it became like not only are our lives all being affected dramatically, but now I'm being coerced into joining a medical experiment that was
Right.
the vaccinations. And I was being forced to take it because of my schooling. I got loud about it too. It wasn't like I was just
Oh, yeah.
quietly angry, that I was like expressing it outward on like social media and stuff. And the amount of wasted energy and the amount of like strife that I caused like myself and relationships, it wasn't it wasn't serving what
Hmm.
I'm about in certain ways. And in some ways there was parts of it where I felt like, yeah, I think that it felt good to like stand up for what, like to let it be known about how I felt and not be afraid to express my opinions, because I'm sure other people had those opinions that were too afraid to express them.
Sure.
So it was like expressing your opinions good, sharing what you believe good, but like the judgment of the other side, not so
Yeah.
good.
Right.
And that was definitely present in the way I approach things, and like
Yeah.
talking at people about their beliefs, or like trying to
Hmm.
challenge their beliefs by talking at them. Not so good. So that was definitely one place where I felt like I was really off base. And yeah, that idea of as I get older, it's getting a little better, a little easier. I'm learning. For me, a big learning has been being okay with being wrong, and speaking what I feel is true in that moment, and then someone says something and it might be in almost like near direct or indirect against what I said, but when they say it, having the openness to actually hear it and be like, oh, I can see how what you just said is more true than what I had said.
Hmm.
And not having the attachment to like, no, but what I said it, so it's mine and it's right. But to just be like,
Sure.
oh, you know what? Yeah, let's go with your thing. I'm actually totally wrong there. That's okay.
I like both of what both of you guys said. Aaron, what you brought in like really brought me into my body and like the somatic expression of like being in myself. And
Hmm.
I've noticed, like Matt, with what you brought up, like when I'm in situations where I'm attached to being right and or wrong, like it tends to bring me out of myself.
Mhm.
Hmm.
It's like I'm like up in some mental construct that like I didn't implant there. And what I've been noticing over time as I get more attuned to what my core energetic frequency like actually feels like in my body, like I'm able to more often settle into the situation without having to like change it in order to be comfortable. I can like just be here. And I notice when I'm not doing that more quickly, which is like I think it's Josh Waitzkin wrote the book The Art of Learning,
Yeah. Yeah.
and he
Yeah.
talks about making smaller circles. So it's like I'm failing all the time, but the failures are like less like huge and catastrophic and more like smaller, where it's like I'm not like blowing my lid because I didn't like take care of my emotional like charge in a good way. I'm like there's like just a sharpness that comes out for a moment, like shit, all right, let me like pull it back in.
A lot of it is just like, where are you living? Are you living in your head? Or are you living a little lower? And like, how often are you living where you're living?
Yeah.
I'm not attached to my ideas. My ideas aren't me. And if
Yeah.
my ideas are wrong, like that doesn't mean that I'm wrong. It just means that those harebrained ideas that my dumb fucking mind came up with, they were
Yeah.
wrong. That's okay.
Yeah. The way I've been thinking about it a lot, and this is like hugely inspired and informed by my mentor friend Bonita Roy. And Bonnie is the most brilliant woman I know. She's just incredible. One of the most brilliant people I've ever like actually met, and been with. And she's like ultra metaphysically like gifted, but also just down to earth, works with animals, like digs into dirt, talks like a regular person, doesn't use fancy words when they don't need to be used. And she talks about simulation. It's like we're either in our bodies or in a simulation. the bodies give rise to the simulation. The simulation is not wrong. A simulation is super useful. Like when I'm hunting, I simulate where I think the tracks are, and then I go check on that simulated reality. And I'm like, yeah, sure enough, the deer are here, or they're not there. That's information for me. So our simulators, our heads, right, are really, really good and useful. And they've kind of, I think we're at a point in history, a point in time where like they've overrun things. So it's like just to know when I'm in a simulation and when I'm not. Often, like when I was like, just to bring it back to kids, like I was in a simulation with my kids most of the time. Oh, I'm gonna get old and I'm not gonna like, ever do this. Like I simulated my life for an eternity, taking care of a little child that needed me and it was just sucking my energy out. Versus like being in my body, which is like, it's not that bad. He's gonna go to sleep. And he's growing, he's changing. Every week is different. And I can adapt to these changes. And I think about all the training I used to do, like physical training that was like I was doing shit with my body and I was simulating at the same time. Here I am doing my yoga thing and I'm like in my body and I'm connected to this 2,000-year-old lineage. There are people just like me doing yoga asanas. And here I am on the top of a mountain when I'm in a fucking city doing yoga, right? Or like I'm doing kettlebell things and I'm simulating the fact that I'm training like a military guy in Russia and like I'm taking a sprint and I'm simulating that there's a tiger behind me. Like I don't need to do any of this shit. I can just be in my body, do the thing that I'm doing without doing any extra. So
It's a lot of
that's
energy.
kind of like
It's a lot
of energy to fucking come up with the
to do all these
fantasies.
simulations. Yeah.
So there's a thread I want to pull on here. So like you gave the example of hunting, and then the hunting, like your simulation is coming from like the landscape, and then you check it. If it's correct, you keep going. If not, like guessing, like you keep going in a different direction. Like look for that next clue. And so it's like a land-based and like connective-based simulation. And then some of these other ones, they're like more, I mean, I don't want to disconnect humans from the land, but they're like human social constructs that have been implanted, right? In culture. Like, so yeah, like the Soviet military kettlebell thing. You've got the Vedic philosophy and movement, and like we're connected to these things. I'm actually, sorry, I'm going on like some tangents, but it's bringing me back to the words that you shared that your son Bodhi had shared. Of like, I just had my first like original thought. Right. And it's like how many of our ideas and the constructs and like the simulations that we're running are other people's simulations that we don't have always like a tangible thing to be able to test it. Right. So it's like you're tracking deer, like the tracks in the dirt or wherever you're seeing the tracks, like give you that real-time tactical feedback. This is real. Like I simulated it, but here it is in reality. And then these other things, there's like, you know, I have like this thought form about a vaccine, right? That was implanted by somebody else's knowledge. I don't know shit about vaccines. Like personally, I don't have that background. Like I think I know some things, but it's all based off of other people's research. I have no real-time tactical feedback. It's like, how do I actually determine what's real in that type of a world? It's like, and then you bring it back to the body, like, oh, this is real. I can relax here. I can like, I feel like I can like pull back into a sense of like
out of the mind. There's a proverb in my system of medicine that I practice, and it's just simply, the mind is the servant to the heart. And what you spoke to, Aaron, about, I think we're in a pivotal point in our history where that has been flipped around. It's flipped on its head. Pun not intended.
Yeah. The simulation is kind of taking over. It's more prevalent.
Yeah, the mind has taken over, and people I see a lot are very disconnected from their heart space, right? Their connection to the sovereign, which is what we call the heart in Chinese medicine.
Right. Yeah. We're also at a point that's really interesting, and I don't know shit about it, but I'll just like
go for it.
Like in information, what our minds can do is being done way fucking better, way fucking faster by machines. So what machines don't quite have is a sensate, embodied, fleshy kind of, this is our greatest gift. This is what makes us unique. It's not that we can process information fast, because that those days are gone, right? We don't process information that fast compared to like how fast information can be processed. So there's something about like, whoa, going back to what you said, Elton, like this is home. this world is home, this body is home. And there's something about like our work, like what I want to transmit to my kids is like, or my work in the world even is like bringing the body back into nature, bringing the mind back into the body, bringing the body back into nature. That's paraphrasing something that Bonnie talks about a lot too. It's like bring the mind back into the body, meaning locate yourself in here, not somewhere out there in some simulation, and then locate this in the larger world, the real world, not a metaverse, the real world.
One of the things that just popped up is this, there's this idea of like, okay, so Aaron, your words, like locate the mind within the body within the mind. This could probably
Yeah.
both ways. And then Matt, you had talked about like the mind being the servant of the heart, and how that's actually like conventionally right now for most of us has been flipped, and it's the other way around. In like a, for yourselves, like how do you recognize when you're there and when you're not there, like in that place of connection versus not? And then like how do you bring yourself back to it? Like what are some, maybe like just one way? And I'll actually, I feel like I can. So my partner Isla is in the midst of a Kundalini yoga teacher training through Yoga Farm. It's out in like Ithaca, New York. Really cool course that she's in. But we've been doing a bunch of Kundalini yoga, and this is like a relatively new phenomenon for me. But there's this woman on YouTube who we've been doing this practice with, and we've been doing, it's like a 10-minute long like energetic cleansing thing. And so she brings you through these postures and breaths specifically to like wake up the energetic centers in the body and to like clear them and enliven them. And like, you know, like I have like a cursory understanding of like the chakras and like these energetic systems at a mental level. But in doing this, I can really feel these energetic like centers in my body light up. What's been so interesting as I've been doing this over the last, I've been doing it for about like for the last 3 or 4 days each day, I'm noticing where the interactions that I've had through the day, where people's thought forms are in my space, and then witnessing them like pop up and then leave, and then feeling my own self different from beginning to end. So it feels like I'm very, very tangibly landing more deeply in like where I actually am outside of all of these influences from the people that I've been interacting with. It's been really cool. Been enjoying it a lot.
It's amazing, Eldon. Yeah, I mean, to go off kind of what you're saying, what I feel like are the practices that I do to get me back to that place that you were referencing are like breath, which is something that sounds like you're incorporating in this, movement. And when it's movement, it's not like, you know, sometimes lifting heavy weights can do that for me. Or, you know, today I ran hill sprints. Like that kind of does it for me. That's just more pain. But like more just like dancing or postures, or like I do a zero form practice that can be very helpful. Then, you know, a very quick and easy one for me when it's sunny out is I just put my face in the sun. I close my eyes and I just drink that sunlight in, and I just take it in, and I feel the ground beneath my feet. I feel Father Sky above my head, and I just feel that like swirling connection of energy coming down and coming up, and like I'm like inside of me connected, and it's like, whoa, okay, there I am.
Beautiful.
But yeah, to draw to what you're saying, Eldon, it's body practice and breath, and then the nature around me, and be, you know, drawing awareness to that nature around me.
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm trying to come up with like a centralized, like an answer that like is adaptable enough. So the answer I'm coming up with right now is shape-shifting. Like, so shape-shifting for me is like whatever internal shape I'm in, if I don't like it, I can melt it. I might do that with breath. I might do that by shifting my posture a little bit. I might do that through movement. So like learning about shape-shifting on a subtle level and on a macro level. And the other piece, like, I don't know why, but sex, it comes up. Like sex, erotic energy. It's not like every time I'm feeling off, I can go have sex. But what I can do is tune into that like deeply compelling, amorous, like the yumminess of life. Like putting my face in the sun is a kind of pleasure
Mm.
pleasure filled erotic thing. I can take a deep breath and just like, so I think that to me is like a portal, right?
Yeah.
Pleasure is a portal in. So I'm calling it sex, but it's the erotic sensual side of life that I think it like brings me in every time. When I'm fighting with someone, when I'm dancing with someone, when I'm just like in the car driving and I need to like a frame shift. If I can figure out what turns me on, like what feels good about this, that's that's the way in.
Yeah, that's now you mention it, like that happens with me in dance, right? Where you play that really good song and you're like, ooh, yeah, and you just start moving to it, and you're just, moving your body in those just great ways that your body just needs, and it like just taps you back in to that place.
And then the thing I heard you saying, Matt, which is beautiful, is like some regular practices. Eldon, you mentioned this too, like just having a regular check-in practice. It's not as spontaneous, but like you have a zero form. You just do that every day. And this is like a way to kind of check in daily. So there's like a reference point that allows you to be more skillful with the adjustments you make throughout the day.
But I will say about that practice, I feel like there is a point where the practice becomes a prison.
Totally.
And there's like a deep connection, or it's very tricky, right? You can convince yourself, I don't need to practice, when maybe you do need to practice. But sometimes it's like, is this really the right action in this time right now too? When do you have to flip the practice on its head and change it around and mix it up?
Yeah.
Make it fresh.
Yeah, it's such an interesting dance between forms and formlessness, right? Like when is it useful to kind of imitate, or not even imitate, but like replicate a form in order to create an inner shape or an inner flow? And when is it useful to just like drop that and tune into what the inner flow actually is, and let that inform you or change your shape? Sometimes your shape sucks. It just does. You kind of need a little something to kind of take the kinks out, and like, oh, okay, now if we just let everyone like do their inner form, people are going to walk around hunched and like in their fucking computer bodies, right? So there's something about like, no, push the top of your head up to the sky, like fill up in all directions, swing your arms a little bit, loosen up your shoulders.
I want to press on something you just said, Aaron, and circle it back into like the parenting and like societal norms thing. Because my experience of children left to their own devices is that we are shapeshifters.
Yeah.
Right. It's very natural. It's very organic. And at least for myself, I have learned to hold more of like the rigid, like fixed postures through enculturation, and specifically like school system, right? Where it was like not okay to just be like loosey goosey, flaily, or like big or small at specific moments. And
sit in your desk, Eldon.
Dude. And so I love this idea. And throughout this conversation, Aaron, my perception of you is like bringing like this playful, and Matt warned me, he said you had strong Loki energy. So I thought it was interesting that you brought in the shapeshifter, but this energy of, hey, I actually don't have the answers, but here's some of like the things that I've been playing with. Like, how do I take this outside of the box and like open it up so that it's more accessible. And I loved how you brought in the erotic. And are you familiar with the work of Audre Lorde at all? Either of you?
Doesn't ring a bell right now. No.
So she did a lot, but she wrote a book called The Uses of the Erotic. It's worth checking out if you're interested at all.
I'm gonna buy it right now. Just take a minute, take a second. I'm just going on my Amazon right now.
Yeah. So it's just like this energy of like the erotic actually is like a very powerful energy within us, that I feel like one of the simulations that I have fallen into is miscontextualizing erotic as always being sexual in in an overt sense. And one of the things that I love about like these Kundalini practices that I've been working with, they're working with the bandhas. So I'm connected to my sex organs through the breath and all of these practices, like very viscerally. And it's like, that is something that feels so powerful to me. And like like as soon as I do that, my shape changes, both when I like engage and also when I let go. It's like, and like what happens, I don't know, it's cool, man. So tangent, but thank you.
I love, like, one of the things I'm really appreciating about your presence in this conversation of it is how you're able to kind of like hold the many threads and kind of tie them back. I really like that.
He's good at that.
Recap. He's really good at that.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, really good at that.
There was something I wanted to bring into the space that was referenced a bit ago, where you had said, Aaron, about, you know, you're not really an adult till you're 70 now. And
Okay.
it really struck a chord for me, because I see the world we live in today. There seems to be a lack of adults in the world we live in, and there's like an elderhood crisis, a lack of elders in our world. I mean, it sounds like you found one in your mentor, which is really fantastic. And I've been lucky enough to be graced with a few in my life too that have been really helpful in my growth and development as a human, as a spirit. But I just wanted to bring that into the space and hear what you guys have to say about that.
Yeah, I feel really lucky to have had many mentors who are, I didn't go to school, I didn't go to college for a long period of time, but I did pursue my passion, and I became friends with people who are way further along on the path than I was. And it's just been like, it's a huge blessing. I'm thinking of my mentor, Tom Alden, right? He's a chiropractor. He taught me anatomy, physiology, adjustment, and also how to look at complex systems in ways that are manageable. So he'd always ask me, like, how many parts does the body have? I was like, I don't know. He's like, 4. I'm like, what? It's like, yeah, you have the layer of skin, you have the layer of bone and joint, you have the layer of muscle and fascia, and you have the organs. 4 parts. Now I have this whole complex thing, and I can break it down into 4 parts, and I can break those down into more parts. And it's not true. It's just a way to organize perception that's useful. I would always ask him, like, how are you doing? He'd be like, I'm normal, mature, and realistic. How are you doing, Aaron? You know?
That's like one of my mentors. She would always, I'd say, how are you doing? She's like, I'm chopping wood and carrying water.
Yeah, just going through doing the thing. Elderhood. And I don't know if you both are familiar with Stephen Jenkinson.
Mm-hmm.
So Stephen Jenkinson wrote Die Wise, and he wrote another book called Come of Age, and it's a case for elderhood in these troubled times, or something like that. And he's done a lot of thinking about it. He's really good at talking and wondering out loud. But essentially, what I got from his book is, like, elderhood is something that we have to evoke. We're not going to go out and find elders. We have to actually call them into being, meaning we have to find people, us, like our age people, right? We have to go out and find the people who have the knowledge, who have the experience, and call them into elderhood, versus them just sitting there enlightened, and us like, hey, you lived. Like, find the old guys, find the old women who, like, have the experience, and spend time with them to show them that their wisdom matters. There's something about that as a kind of pro-social service to the world, you know, a service to them, a service to yourself, and also, like, it brings back that institution of, like, wisdom carriers. Yeah.
What you were just saying wrapped me back into, and I won't be able to quote who she was quoting, but it's a Substack that I follow by a woman named Scout. And she was quoting somebody else, and it was a quote about eldership, and it was basically like that eldership doesn't happen just because you get older. It happens when your community chooses you as an elder.
Yes.
And that it's like, it's not necessarily even about like a numerical age, but just like, hey, like, we're choosing you as an elder, so like now you're an elder, now like live into it. And there's like a sense of responsibility with that.
Totally.
Really interesting. Been wrapping my mind around that conundrum for quite a few years now.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important and good to strive for wisdom, to strive for mastery, but those are titles that other people give you. It's not something you claim, right? And I think elderhood is a similar thing. It's like, I'm old, but I'm only an elder if people, like, are asking me to be that.
a hawk just landed and is staring at me from the roof of
The
the
elder
garage.
realm, from the realm of elders.
Mm.
What the fuck are you kids talking
Ooh,
about? That's what it's saying.
Yeah,
I love
exactly.
it.
Like,
So, this really, thank you for sharing that, Alden.
mhm.
And yeah, it really draws me to this thing that's like plaguing our society, and maybe this is part of why there is a lack of elders in the society. Is there's a lack of connectivity, and there's a lack of responsibility too. You know, you described in your life as a parent, Aaron, this like very isolating quality. And
Yeah.
even as a parent who's a bit older than you were, in your early 20s, I was in my early 30s when I became a parent. It's still pretty isolating. And there is a kind of energy that I've experienced with like grandparents too, where it's like they're like, oh, it's not our job. It's you guys. You guys are the ones that get to suffer now. We suffered, now you get to. Right. And
Yeah.
there isn't this like generational responsibility to bring up the youngers, and there isn't this connectivity through the generations, right? So a lot of people in their younger years, like when I was in my 20s, like I only experienced people between the ages of like 20 to maybe 50. Like that was the
Totally.
people I experienced. I was like the only grandchild that would see my grandparents every month or so. And I would never see children though. So it's like there isn't that like connectivity between the generations. And
Totally.
we're like so drawn into our screens, and yeah, there's just a lack of that like rich community.
Yeah, I mean, one of the ways I'm trying to address that, it's I mean, you're framing it so well. I'm not even thinking of that as much. It's just like it feels good for me to be in a space where there are kids, and where there are old people, and when there are young people, and we're all wrestling. That just feels good. It's great. So I've created spaces like that. So parents bring their
How
kids, the parents wrestle with each other, the kids wrestle with each other, adults wrestle with kids, the kids are wrestling with their own parents, other parents, old folks wander in, like people who don't have kids are there, and it's just a beautiful space to like play, fight, enjoy each other, hang out, talk, have conversations, lounge, rest. And this is kind of what I imagine the village common was like, but we don't have village commons anymore. We have fucking self-help courses we sign up for. So like I'm trying to address the problem by just creating a space that like here's a free space, we can come leave a donation to pay cover the cost of the space, but like it's going really well. It's beautiful.
really? So I'm so curious about that. Well, how did you create that container, and how did you draw people in to that container? Because that's quite unconventional. And a
Yeah,
lot
so
of times people are like resistant to that which they don't fully understand yet.
it was a happy accident. Basically, I created a 6 week series with my friend Ethan on play fighting. People signed up. They come on Wednesday nights. We're teaching them play fighting games. It's like a closed group. We get to show up, and then we have a practice space every Saturday afternoon. And we decided, like, hey, come to this practice space. If you're signed up, you can bring a friend, bring your family members, bring whoever. And a few people were like, can we bring kids? And we were like, yeah, sure, bring kids. And it just turned into the most beautiful thing where like people are bringing their spouses, their kids, their neighbors, their grandparents, like everyone's coming. And it's just like, and I think it just speaks to the need, right? I didn't actually create it. It was like that space opened up and there was a huge need. So it's being filled. So I would like to say that I brained it out, but I didn't. It just like happened. And now it's awesome.
That's brilliant.
That's super
Yeah.
cool. So I want to wrap one more thread into which you all brought to life a moment ago, with kind of like this cultural atmosphere around like the lack of eldership. And one of the things that I heard from you, Aaron, that you pulled forward, I'm going to use a different word than you use, but is like an authentic humility. Like, like you don't choose that you're an elder. You don't choose that you're a master. You don't choose that you're the expert. Like that is something that is given to you by others. You just stand in what is yours, right? And then like to me, a really integral part of being like a true elder is like the humility in the context of like, and I'm going to quote one of my teachers, Bridge felt this, who's probably quoting somebody else, but that humility is basically when you're stepping out of comparison to anybody else. So I'm not better than, same as, or less than anyone else.
That's beautiful.
That's like a true humility. And I feel like in the culture of convention, there's a lot of us that step into bigger shoes than we are actually in and like can actually hold. And then there's a lot of us that don't step into as big a pair of shoes, if you will, as it's actually ours. We make ourselves either bigger or smaller, or just like vacate completely to try to either fit in or dominate in the spaces that we're in. And it's like that atmosphere to me like doesn't make room for true wisdom to emerge, right? Because I guess like for me, wisdom is an emergent quality. It's something that happens like in a moment, as opposed to something that you can like write in a book.
Yeah, it's contextual.
Mm-hmm.
There may be some principles that underlie wiseness, but like it's applied to the moment. Yeah.
So if I may weave in yet another thread, apologies, guys, to keep weaving things in.
Yeah, man, we making tapestries.
Yeah. You brought forth this idea, Eldon, of like not stepping in to the shoes that you need to step into. Right? Like there are shoes that need to be filled in this society, in this community that you find yourself in, and you don't step into them. And that leaves a vacuum that can be very harmful. And something that I'm experiencing in my own growth and my own like experience, and in watching other fathers in particular, is there is not a stepping in to that very like grounded, firm, yet yielding masculine, like that, you know what's right in your heart and you stand for that which is right. And there's this very interesting moment we're in where like we've existed in a patriarchy for hundreds, if not thousands of years, right? We haven't been in like a balanced society for a long fucking time. And the pendulum is like, there's this like strong counterculture that's swinging the other way. And there's been almost a rejection of the masculine in many ways in our society right now, or at least in a lot of the circles that I walk in. And that's not to say that the patriarchy doesn't exist still, because it does. Like, I'm not saying that, but there's this weird, confusing time where a lot of us are like, us men are like, not really sure how to walk in the shoes that we're supposed to be in. It's really tricky. And there's a lot of times for myself, I find, where it's like, I know in my heart that I need to speak up. I'm like, oh, like, I don't know how it's going to be received. I don't know how I should say that. There's a lot of confusion, and ultimately the easiest way is to just vacate. I just won't deal with that.
Yeah.
And is that humility there? Is that the right thing? That's not the right action. Sorry, go ahead, Aaron.
No, I mean, one of the things that's coming to me through what you're saying is like this, all the times I haven't spoken up because I was in a simulation that my speaking up had to sound a particular way, had to come in a particular form, had to be articulate and well formulated and whatever, right? Versus like, whoa, something feels off. I don't know what it is. I want to take a shower right now because I don't know what's going on, but it feels dirty in here. Like, that's not like, that's something that's needed, right? Like, and it's that's not a bunch of facts. But there's something about like, hey, this is what's going on right now. Can you clarify this thing? Because I don't think it's right, and I don't think we have to make this decision or whatever. Yeah. So I think we need to step into those shoes of like, hey, I matter. My perception matters. The things I feel.
Something's dirty.
Matter. Yeah. yeah, something doesn't smell right, you know, not physically, but in my soul.
Hmm.
Something's rotten in the state of Denmark.
Hmm.
What's going on?
Yeah, and it brings me back kind of full circle to it's like, Aaron, I love what you were saying. It's like this doesn't feel clean. I know I matter. So how do I stand in that and at the same time let you matter too?
Totally.
And
I mean,
that's a
it's
place, yeah.
yeah. I mean, there's respect there. It's like, hey,
Mhm.
I matter, you matter. We're not meeting eye to eye. I'm not gonna just like go along with like the thing that's being said that we all go along with. Like, what's going on?
Mhm.
That's like two sovereign individuals or sovereign people meeting one another and working things out versus power over power over power.
And just dishonesty. Like what you're expressing is honesty
Yeah,
in that.
yeah.
It's an
Or like
honest
lack of
interaction.
betrayal. Yeah, you're not betraying yourself, and you're also not betraying the other person by like not bringing yourself to the whole thing.
Hmm.
So I wanna weave a layer in here since Matt, you already brought in the P word, which I usually try to avoid, but you already did it, so we're gonna go with it.
Oh shit,
Dude,
we
it's a
talk about
safe word.
patriarchy.
It's a
God
safe
damn.
word with Aaron. There's people you don't say
Patriarchy?
it to,
Yeah,
but it's
yeah.
safe
So
with
okay,
Aaron.
so everything that we just brought in is beautiful. I love this. And I have to acknowledge, like, I'm in a relationship in which I've really gotten to look at power dynamics at like at a deeper level. The more that I've learned, the more I've become aware that, like, because let's just use a 500-year timeline, right? So 500 years of patriarchal colonization through a Eurocentric lens. I'm just going to put that there, right? So
That's quite a mouthful there.
Britain, British Empire to present. Let's just call that 500 years ballpark, right? In which women of all ethnic groups, all skin tones have been oppressed and suppressed in a legal way up until like less than 100 years ago, right? And even still, right? They don't have full rights over bodies in some states. In this country and other countries, it's a whole different thing. People of color also have had during that time like a really hard go of it, right? People that look like me have been like coming down on people in a very physical and violent way. So when our nervous systems have experienced that, like what is then like, how do I own my experience and be centered in myself while also understanding that my presence might actually take someone else out of center just because I am who I am, doesn't matter what I do.
Feels like a big responsibility.
Yeah. I mean, my first response to that, or like my first thought on that is something like looking at what power is from a very simple place, not situating it in history or just like in the animal world, what is power? What's the
Mm-hmm.
simplest definition of power? This is something Bonnie does really well.
Mm-hmm.
And she talks about power as being simplest definition, who gets to move who. The person moving the most people is the powerful one, right? Who gets to move who? So in a wolf pack, the alpha male or whatever, alpha female, twitches its ears and the whole pack moves. There's the powerful one, right? I want that spot. You leave. There's the powerful one. So you can look around rooms, look in social situations, and you see who's the powerful one by how bodies position themselves. I think we pick up on things that are way more subtle than just skin color. And by being attuned, way more subtle than gender, right? By being attuned, you can actually, as a sensitive person, position yourself, shapeshift to create ease in the field. And that doesn't mean making yourself small and tiny, and it just means like, hey, I shapeshifted myself, so I am now safe.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
and doesn't work all the time, but there's something about that level of attunement, how your body bends space, knowing how your body bends space, and choosing to bend that space well. When it's time to bend space and like get people to like really understand information or feel like they're in good hands, I bend space differently when it's time to like have people feel like they're going to be heard, right? So learning how to bend space with your body, I think is one of the keys to that.
Yeah, I love
I love what you just brought in.
I
Yeah.
I want to share on that. I mean, it's beautiful. Yeah, that what you brought in, Aaron, because I've experienced that I was shadowing my mentor for 5 years, in acupuncture treatment rooms, right? And I was more or less a fly on the wall, unless I'm attuned to that person and they invite me to become a part of that space, really really present. And, I'm a like masculine man. I've got a strong build. I can make myself really big in a space, like really big. I can be very present. And I quickly had to learn how to make myself very small and to really go into the background and shift back and really honor what was going around me and be like, I am just going to be back here and not really be like a big presence in this space because it was not my place. And that's really, now that you mention it, that has informed me on like how to interact, because I have to work as a healer, as someone who's like offering healing to people. And when a woman walks into my treatment office, like they need to feel safe and comfortable, right? And it's like, how do I position myself? How do I interact with their body in a way that allows them to feel like safe and taken care of?
And it gets subtle, right? Because like I do a lot
So
of
subtle.
play fighting wrestling things. So if I'm encountering a body that's less experienced, male or female, and they get the sense that I'm taking it easy on them, that can feel patronizing and disrespectful, right? So it's a sense of like, I'm going to meet you where you're at. We're going to have this interaction. We're going to tune to each other. We're going to see what's appropriate for both of us. I'm challenging myself. You're challenging yourself. These are the inner handicaps I'm giving myself, or inner handicaps I'm asking you to give yourself, so that we can meet and have a powerful, mutually beneficial experience. And the other way I like to work that is through embodied games. Like, I think embodied games are one of the best ways for people of diverse, everyone has, like, people from all shades of experience, right, can kind of meet and talk with bodies if we're willing to. And there's a lot that can be learned and transmitted in that way.
So one of the threads that y'all both like brought in here feels like really poignant to me is, okay, so my partner is Filipina, and from her culture there's a word called kapwa, and the kapwa is the shared self.
Yeah.
And so like what in different situations that y'all are talking about, like what I hear you talking about is actually taking a stance within a shared self in the communal space, where you're choosing to be aware of more than just the myopic of like what your body is doing, but actually noticing the bending of space around your body, to use your term here, and I love that term, and noticing how your stance within space and your movement within space is actually influencing all of the others within the space, and also to notice how their stance and postures, I'm guessing, is influencing you. And within that, it's like there's this level of awareness that obviously has been cultivated by both of you in your respective places to be able to hold that stance of the shapeshifter who can actually articulate their body and energy in a way that creates safety around you, or at least room for safety around you. Yeah, it's a really dope practice. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, no, I really like that frame. Like that we, I think of it as like the I and the we. Like having the awareness of the we is beautiful. Like in this conversation, there's a we that's been formed, and we've been kind of playing with that, and it's gone places I wouldn't go on my own. And I know the two of you talk a lot, but like having me in it changes the dynamic. So like it brings us all into a place that's different, right? And being aware of that in space, in conversation, whether it's virtual, like I think that's like, yeah, an important skill to do good in the world, to make people feel well.
Hell yeah. Well, we are pushing up against a time to close, and I feel like that is a good closing remarks. So before we close things out, Aaron, where can people find you?
They can't. It's impossible. They can look forever and never find me. It's so hard to find me. A lot of that comes from disorganization, and a lot of it comes from pure contempt for this system as it is. But I'm working on putting together the website. the School of Physical Intelligence, which is kind of just a place to kind of hold the body of work that I do, a lot of collaborations with a lot of amazing movers. I noticed that as I'm speaking, I sound a little more like an infomercial than I want to sound like. So I'm going to shift into giving people my number until my website is up and running. People can find me by texting me or calling me or WhatsApping me. WhatsApp is preferred. Send a video, 857-919-0014. And
I will also share
that's
that
United States.
where I first met you, Aaron. Well, not the first time I met you, but the first time I got to really work with you was through Rafe Kelly's Evolve Move Play, which you are a co-facilitator of. You, Kyle, and Rafe.
And I, and Rafe.
And you and Kyle, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just like, we do a really good job working with each other. So Evolve Move Play is a place that has a lot of like online real estate where I can be found. Thanks for reminding me of that.
And you'll be doing the spring retreat, right?
Yeah, the spring and the summer retreat. And Kyle and I are probably alone or together. We're going to do the fall retreat on the East Coast.
Very cool.
And there's a whole bunch of workshops all over the place that either Kyle is going to lead or I'm going to lead as well. So there are places I can be found. Wow. That's amazing.
Well, thank you, Aaron, so much for meeting us today. It was a treat, my friend.
Such a pleasure. Thank you. And Eldon, really, really nice to meet you.
Yeah,
thank
you as well.
Yeah, I love how you're a master weaver. Thank you.
When you're ready to begin your journey, visit elementalmovement.life. We'll see you there.